Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us here today. We shall commence the second session of the evening with a panel discussion titled Flavours of Ghoda, based on the eponymous book by Nicole Mody that was just launched early this evening at the Cross Maidan. The book is a collection of recipes that combines the city's love for food with its cultural heritage. We have with us on this panel Rahul Akerkar, Sanghvi, and Nicole Mody, with Antoine Lewis as the moderator. I shall now briefly introduce our panelists for the evening. Rahul Akerkar opened the restaurant Indigo in Mumbai in 1999. Later, between 2005 and 2013, he set up several outposts of the Indigo Delhi across Bombay, established the restaurant Neil, dedicated to North Indian cuisine, founded Movable Feast, a multi-cuisine catering company, all of which were part of his venture, Degustables Hospitality. Our next panelist, Sanghvi, is a food critic and journalist whose career straddles print, television, books, and new media. In 1978, he was appointed editor of the erstwhile Bombay magazine, and in 1986, he became the editor of Sunday, the APB Group's news magazine. He was the editor of the Hindustan Times from 1999 to 2003, and later went on to become the editorial director. He is well known for his weekly column, Root Food, in the Hindustan Times Sunday magazine Brunch. He has also penned the foreword for Flavours of Ghoda. Nicole Mody is a food blogger and the co-curator of the food section at the Ghoda Festival, and she is, of course, the author of Flavours of Ghoda, Recipes from the Art District. Antoine Lewis, who will be moderating the session, is a Bombay-based food and wine writer and one of the directors of the Tata Literature Live Festival. He has written extensively on the city's restaurants and eating out trends for the last 15 years. His articles have appeared in various publications such as the Sunday Times, the GQ, BBC Good Food India, Forbes Life, and Midday, among others. Antoine has also served as the editor of the Savvy Cookbook and was also on the jury of the India Food Bloggers Awards last year. Thank you.
Okay, so just before the event started, Rahul and I were chatting, and a gentleman came up and said, "You have to read this poem from Arun Kolatkar from the Ghoda Cafe Poems." So I'm going to start the evening with a poem by Arun, which really, in a sense, maps the city of Bombay. They're serving keema pav at Olympia, dal gosht at Baghdadi, puri bhaji at Kailash Parbat, aab gosht at Sarvi's, kebabs with sprigs of mint at Gulshani, Iran, nalli nihari at Noor Mohammadi's, baida gotala at the Oriental, paya soup at Benazir, brun maska at Military Cafe, upma at Swagat, shira at Anand Vihar, and fried eggs and bacon at Wayside Inn. For yes, it's breakfast time at Ghoda, as elsewhere, in and around Bombay, up and down the whole hungry longitude. In fact, the 73rd, if I'm not mistaken. Arun Kolatkar is a poet, and he's someone who's very intrinsic to the character of Ghoda. He made Wayside Inn his second home, and if you read a lot of pieces about him, you'll say, like, if you're looking for Arun Kolatkar, you will find him at Wayside Inn. When Wayside Inn shut down and moved, became another restaurant, he moved across the road just behind to Military Cafe. But Wayside Inn and the Ghoda have been home to a number of people, and a number of historical things have happened over there. Most famously, Dr. Ambedkar wrote a part, at least, if not the whole Constitution of India at one of the tables. Before that, I think somewhere in the 1940s, three gentlemen, Rusi Karanja, Dinanath Natkarni, and Benjamin Horniman, sat together at one table, a table for four. The fourth seat was left empty. They were there to discuss the start of a new paper. It was going to be called the Blitz. It was going to be Vox Populi, Vox Dei, the voice of God, so the voice of people. And the last street was empty because that was supposed to represent God. So now we've got this very interesting cookbook that's come out that Nicole has written that captures some of the new flavors of Kala Ghoda, of the new restaurants that have come up in the area. A lot of the old places have gone up, that have gone away. There's a lot of sense of change in the area, but that, I suppose, is inevitable for every city. But before we start off the evening and start talking about the various journeys that food takes, that restaurants take, and that people take through food in Bombay, let's talk about the book, Nicole. And why don't you tell us about how it started and why you did the book, and a little bit about the book itself.
So, is this on? Yeah. The book is called Flavours of Kala Ghoda. It encapsulates everything culinary inside Kala Ghoda. Actually, it's in and around Kala Ghoda. We started the food section. I'm the curator of the food section at Kala Ghoda about 5 years ago. And the principle behind this is that, in fact, Rahul was one of our first chefs who came and demonstrated at the festival. The principle behind this was you come, a popular chef or a restaurant comes, they demonstrate a few dishes, give recipes out that are simplified for a home audience. So, I mean, if I want to learn how to make a souffle, and my favorite restaurant, Indigo, has actually perfected the souffle, he's going to come and explain how I can make it at home. And I had a collection of recipes from 4 years, which is about that fat. And someone said, you know what, we should just put this in a book. And I said, oh my God, that's a brilliant idea. Why haven't we thought of this before? And that's how it came about. I had some time on my hands earlier this year in March, and I went to Brinda, who is the festival director at Kala Ghoda, and I mentioned, you know what, let's actually do this book, let's do this. And she said, go ahead, and that's actually how it came about. It's so many of the restaurants that have taken part in the festival over the last 4 years, as well as other restaurants in the area. So we've got recipes from, say, a Chetna. So there's thali recipes. We have Khyber giving us Indian recipes. We have La Folie, who's the newest entrant in the Kala Ghoda dessert area, giving us recipes. We have the Nutcracker. We have Kala Ghoda Cafe, the Pantry, Woodside Inn. Everyone who's been part of this and who will be part of this in the future.
Okay. How did you decide which recipes would go? And there are so many places around here. I'm sure you'll have had a number of chefs demonstrating.
So that's sort of a personal process. If I liked the food, it was definitely on my list of things I wanted to put in the book. If I didn't like the food, it was sort of like, no, I'm not doing it. And that's basically how it is.
Okay, fair enough. Veer?
Yeah.
You've been in Bombay for a very long time. You still consider yourself a Bombay boy.
True. Bombay old man, but Bombay.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
You've probably seen a lot of the Kala Ghoda restaurants, well, not simply Kala Ghoda, but the area surrounding, because Kala Ghoda itself didn't have very many, but if you were to extend it to Churchgate and Fort and Colaba, take us through some of your memories of this place.
Yeah, you know, Antoine, I was just trying to think after we spoke what I remember of Kala Ghoda. I remember Samovar because you can hear me, I hope, yeah? Right. Because my parents were friends with the owners, and later I was more intimately involved with that restaurant. Then I remember Khyber, not for any other reason, but that Mr. Bahel, who owned it, lived in the next building to me at on A Road in Churchgate. And though Khyber later went on to develop an awesome reputation for Indian food, the usual oily rubbish from what I remember, and the only thing worth eating in those days used to be the grilled ham and cheese sandwich, not a dish I think they're famous for. What else do I remember? I remember Wayside Inn, it was wonderful. I remember Chetna, and I think that's about it. I actually don't remember this much of that area. I remember as a small child, my father had some friends, some of them not entirely legitimate. One of them owned a cabaret type restaurant near where Fab India now is called La Bella. I remember that, and it was actually quite novel for me because I used to be smuggled in, and there would be a belly dancer doing cabaret type performances. And this, remember what, 61, 62? If it happened now, Raj Thackeray and Uddhav Thackeray and co probably burn it down. But Bombay was much more liberal in that era. It's the sort of era they tried to capture, I think very unsuccessfully, in Bombay Velvet. But you had a lot of that happening. But as far as I was concerned, the center of restaurants in Bombay was not, sorry about this, Kala Ghoda, but it was Churchgate Street. Churchgate Street was where all the restaurants were, most of which sadly no longer exist. I remember Purohit, which did vegetarian food, Berries. My own favorite was Bombelli's, which only very old people here will remember, which had a branch on Warden Road in Breach Candy and called itself a Swiss cafe at least. All right, can you hear me better now?
Hello, okay, you can hear, all right, sorry. Okay, so my own favorite was Bombelli's, which called itself a Swiss cafe, but it did a sort of generalized club-type European menu and was famous for its hot dog, which was one long frankfurter slit into half, put between a bun with one green chili. And for a long time, whenever I went anywhere in the world, I wondered why there was no chili in the hot dog. I remember that, and I remember the Ambassador Hotel, which had wonderful food in those days. It was actually the place that invented many dishes, including the steak a la Fernandez, I think it was called, in which they would take a perfectly good cut of meat. They used to do the catering for British Airways, so I think they stole the beef from the flight kitchen, and they would flambe it at your table with milk, cinnamon, brandy, thereby destroying whatever flavor the meat had, but it was still a wonderful spectacle. They had a chuni cutlet, I remember, named after a regular at the restaurant who presumably was called Chunilal or Chuni Bhai or something. But it was just a very vibrant, lively atmosphere. It's dead now. Nothing really remains. The only thing that remains, well, there was talk of the town at the other end, which is where Usha Utthap and many, many singers first started out. And you could go in and listen to live music. It was a wonderful atmosphere. The only thing that remains is Gaylord at the other end, which was your typical old Churchgate Street restaurant. You had an Indian menu, you had a sandwich menu, you had a Western menu, the standout dish of which was chicken a la KGAF. And I remember as a child going and puncturing it to see if the butter would spurt out. You had a band in the evening with Sweet Lorraine at the microphone. I still remember her name. And it was, like many of the Churchgate Street restaurants in the old days, a sort of 24-hour almost affair. There used to be, some of you will remember this, singing duo, the musical duo, Shankar Jaikishan. Jaikishan used to sit at Gaylord all day pretty much. You'd meet all his friends there, do all his meetings there. And it was much more glamorous, I think, than Churchgate Street is now. But for me, all of those old restaurants, except the ethnic ones, perhaps Mahesh Lunch Home or Wayside Inn, ultimately faded because they were multi-cuisine restaurants of the kind that actually don't survive anywhere in India, except perhaps in Calcutta, where they're all on Park Street. But I actually think, and this is probably a controversial view, we all celebrate Rahul Akerkar for Indigo, but I think that the first proper modern restaurant that did food that it took seriously, did it to a very high standard, and was outside a hotel, was probably Under the Over in Pedro, right? Under the bridge, which did really wonderful food. And I remember because I lived near there going and hearing Rahul, who then as now had a minimal respect for many of his customers, getting into arguments with people who would say things like, "These are not home fries." And he would say, "They're made in my home. What do you mean they're not home fries?" You remember that? Yes, yes. I actually think that the whole Bombay restaurant scene changed from then. Okay, that's my ramble, but go on.
Okay. I just wanted to ask you, Veer, I mean, since you brought up the issue of catering of British Airways, do you remember Volga, which also did the Air India catering, I'm told? And next to it was...
That explains a lot about Air India. Yeah. But
and Bistro next to it, both were rival restaurants.
Volga I remember briefly, but the one I really remember is Napoli, which then became Chopsticks. I don't know if people know this. Napoli was the first restaurant in Bombay to have an espresso machine, the first restaurant in Bombay to have a jukebox. And because it had an espresso machine, which was a great novelty, and it used to do jhagwala coffee, and cappuccino was too difficult for the Punjabi owners to pronounce, they decided to start calling cappuccinos espresso. A confusion that I think persists to this day.
Absolutely.
Many. Espresso. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so I think Napoli probably doesn't get the credit it deserves for misleading Indians.
Absolutely. Rahul, you've created restaurants all over the country. Hopefully you haven't had to have these arguments with home fries with people everywhere else. But do you think this area, Kala Ghoda, South Bombay, has influenced you in any way? And do you think there's a different kind of clientele in this area?
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't know so much that it's, that it's Kala Ghoda as an area that sort of influenced me, but I think it's a lot to do with the architecture. If you sort of look at the real south part of Bombay, which is from whatever Ballard Estate and all of this. I mean, I think a lot of the old buildings with high ceilings and beautiful stone and such, I think are really conducive to having really great dining spaces. And I think it's a shame that most of it's owned by the BPT and comes with their own set of sort of licensing issues and such, but the entire architecture of this part of town, I think, is just fantastic for food and for things for businesses along those lines. I remember two places. I remember this place called the Victory Stall. Yep. Incredible dansak. Okay, and I remember one day a week, and I remember sitting there and watching the sailboats at the gateway, right on the, as you're walking through the gateway, it was right on the left, and it was the place, and it really just overlooked all the sailboats coming in and such there, the little harbor, and it was really nice. I also remember a place called, I think it was called Gulmohar, which is an old property, and they had the most amazing restaurant, which is now where the new Taj is. And it used to be this old, beautiful building, or well, it was right of the yacht club, Greens Hotel, whatever. And I remember going there in the afternoon, sometimes with my parents, we'd have sandwiches and tea and stuff, and you looked out at the gateway and everything else. And then I remember on Colaba Causeway, there was another restaurant that I used to go to with my mum, and it was called Horseshoe. Yes. And they had this thing called the chocolate rocket. I remember that as a child. It was just sort of cone of chocolate on a biscuit. And I used to have an iced tea and my chocolate rocket in those days. I remember that. But but to come back, I think this is like a great part of town, as is other places, as are other places too.
Okay. We've been talking about places that have shut down, things like from the past. One of the things about a city is that it's very dynamic. It's constantly changing. So is there a sense that we need to kind of feel the sense of loss for every place that shuts down every time a samovar is lost, or a rhythm house, or is that just simply the nature of cities, that new things will come up in place of old?
That's a difficult one, Antoine. I mean, of course cities must regenerate themselves, of course places must close down, but and when people remember restaurants, I think we remember them for various reasons. We remember them for food, but we remember them also for what they represented. Rahul's talked about Victory Stall. I don't know if you know, it was run by something called the Time and Talents Club, which was an association of, well, old is unkind, Parsi ladies of a certain age who ran, many of whom are here. Hello, ladies. Sorry, I did not mean old. It also did a great cookbook, and all the profits from that went to the Jawans. They started, if I remember correctly, during the 1965 war, and it was home-style food. They did really outstanding food of the kind you wouldn't normally find in most places, certainly Parsi food. The Horseshoe, which he remembers, which was in the Indian Eucharistic Congress building, which later became the Delhi Darbar, I think. Yeah,
the next building
was
actually.
again
Holland House.
was again a Parsi.
Yeah.
Again run by a Parsi organization, and all of them, I think, had a certain commitment to quality and to making food that they would be happy to eat at home. So I don't think that you have that any longer. I think it's become much more an industrial, commercial enterprise. Samovar was like home food. So yes, so you feel a nostalgia. I don't feel any nostalgia for Volga, I'm sorry to say this, or for La Bella or whatever. But I feel a nostalgia for places that were run with passion, that were run by people who wanted to create the food they would eat at home, not just purely people who wanted to turn a fast buck.
Rahul, as a restaurateur, I mean, do you feel, I mean, you've opened and shut restaurants, you've moved on from certain places. Is there an idea that, that a restaurant has a certain time and a place, and as long as it's there, it's fine, but you can't kind of keep it indefinitely?
Well, you know, I think it's a function of many things. One is, I think, changing demographics of the city, changing in the cost of real estate, which I think affects a lot of ventures and the viability of those ventures. I think a lot has to do with the way we eat today, with the amount of time one spends when one goes out to eat. I don't know how many people still dine anymore, and by that I mean whether you actually go and have a bottle of wine and you spend some time and a conversation and have a meal. I think it's more about sort of entertainment and the buzz and people sort of looking down the right side of the menu rather than the left. So a lot of it is now price driven. And over the years, Indigo, we opened in '99 and we had a great run, and everybody was like, oh, you should have brought it back to the old days. It was like coming home, and as you were saying, home cooked food and that sort of thing. But my whole argument was, well, it's all nice to say that it was like coming home, but the point is that you go home today and then you want to go out to eat. So time and a place, and I think everything has a life. If you even look at all the big, all of the sort of great classic restaurants all over the world, they all reinvent themselves after a point, and it's the interiors are redone, they're modernized, the way the food is served is changed, all of that happens. All of that happens.
Yeah, I don't know if Rahul remembers this, but in 1998, I moderated a discussion, I forget where, somewhere in a suburban Bombay hotel, on the future of restaurants in Bombay. And we had various people on the panel, some dead, some forgotten. We had Sabina Saigal-Saikia, who was then a very powerful critic, Karen, Anand, Rahul, and A.D. Singh. And they had just been partners in Just Desserts. And we were discussing what makes a restaurant successful, and Rahul said the food. If you can't get the food right, don't bother opening a restaurant. And AD said, yeah, well, food's okay, but it's the buzz. It's got to be exciting. It's got to come to. And we didn't realize at that stage, but those were going to be the two dominant trends of the coming century. You have places like Rahul's, which were always noted for their food, and you have places like AD's, which are noted now for their buzz factor, the visibility, the celebrity clientele, and both in their own way, I think, are as valid.
Nicole, as a food blogger and someone from, a different generation, what's your take on this? I mean, because if you look at Kala Ghoda, or if you look at Bombay, even South Bombay, you've got a number of new places, Nutcracker, Pantry, all of them doing very unusual stuff, very interesting stuff. Do you think there's a sense of loss, or are you happy with the new crop of restaurants?
Okay, so I need to start by saying I don't remember half of what you guys talked about right now.
Much older than you.
I don't think I was born, but I have heard of it, read about it. I think there's definitely what Rahul said, a time and a place, and what we've seen with the new. In fact, I know most of the restaurateurs in and around the Kalagoda area. I actually consider them friends. We've gotten to know each other over the years, and I think it's definitely largely passion driven. The newer restaurants, they're focusing more on the taste of the food. They're not so concerned about the buzz surrounding it. They're pretty sure that if the food is good, if the food is wholesome, like Nutcracker, for example, she's got her recipes, her grandmom's recipes. She's there every day making sure the food is actually tastes the way she wants it to taste, and it's doing really well. I mean, you can't actually walk in there and get a table that's always packed. It's the same thing with Kaboom. They have a different menu every day. They've got this new shipping container style restaurant at Ballard Estate, and they're packed for lunch every single day. The pantry is working with organic food, with local farmers. They're pushing sustainable farming, and they're really packed as well. It's all about passion driven. Even they started in Kalagoda, they started small, and in the last year, what has happened is everyone has acknowledged how fantastic it's been, and they've boomed. They've suddenly opened 4 stores, they've opened a restaurant as well. It has to be about the passion. It has to be about people actually making sure that they push things through. So I, for one, don't actually miss Joss. I mean, I do miss Joss so much, but I think at the end of it, what happened with Joss is it had become very clinical, it had become mechanical, and there was no taste anymore.
Okay.
So it does, it shifts. You need to have the passion, and it needs to stay, which is why I suppose you do need to actually reinvent yourselves.
Or the Zodiac Grill, which I think outlived its usefulness by 10 years. Should have closed 10 years before it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen someone at Zodiac Grill when I've been there. It's just always been
It was like a private dining room every time you went in.
pretty much.
Also, I think, as time has gone on, there are now more kids on the block who've actually who are themselves chefs or who understand the food. It's now less about sort of sitting at the gala counting the cash at the end of the day, but I think it's a lot more hands-on restauranting now, and I think that sort of goes hand in hand with as Nicole was saying about being passionate and stuff about the food and the way you operate. And I think it's also a sort of a gradual shift now to, in terms of, I think, integrity in the food. Okay, it's people say, well, what are the new trends? And I don't think it's trends. I think trends is really about people going to a restaurant and sort of seeing that the people behind the scenes and the food that's served is what I call honest and true to what they're doing and at a price point that isn't absurd, that sort of makes sense too. So I think you will see people who sort of have a lot more integrity in the food that they serve.
I mean, I agree with what he says, but I've done a piece about this. What also worries me about the restaurant business now is the homogeneity. People no longer want to open restaurants. They want to open chains. When I come to Bombay and I say, where should I go? And they say, well, Zorawar Kalra has a restaurant in BKC, and there's a soda bottle opener wala. Hello, I've been to all these restaurants in Delhi. I don't really come to Bombay to try it. When Indigo came to Delhi, I said, very nice, but I love the Indigo in Bombay. Hello. And I think one of the worries, and I think it's a good idea for people to open chains, I have no problem with that, but one of the worries with this chain concept is A, at some stage the money boys take over, the passion goes, and B, every city should have a restaurant that reflects its character. If there are fatty baos in every city or masala libraries in every city or whatever, in some way I find it detracts from the character of that city.
What would you say is the city for Bombay that really reflects the city for Bombay, the restaurant for Bombay rather, that reflects the kind of character of Bombay?
Yeah, I'm very boring. I go to places like Gajali and Som, which most of you probably regard as cliches. I am not very
keen on the fancy restaurants of Bombay. I'm from Delhi, where the food standard is significantly higher from Bombay, he says, antagonizing the audience at one fell swoop. But I think there are probably, if I had to go just for fun, not more than 4 restaurants in Bombay I would go to.
So you're saying the old Maharashtrian and Gujarati places really is what?
Yeah, which you can't get anywhere else. Now, why am I going to go to NRI or Fatty Bao or whatever? I'll go somewhere else. Okay. These are just identical restaurants that I run everywhere.
Rahul, if you had to choose?
I had to choose what? No, I won't. But have to choose
a
what?
restaurant that really captures the spirit or the essence of the city.
Well, I think a lot of our taste profile here is sort of khatta meeta, agro dolce, that kind of thing. So I think cuisines and restaurants that sort of serve that kind of food is I think a lot to do with the Bombay taste palette. There is sweetness in Gujarati food, and you have you have coconut and stuff in the coastal food of Maharashtra. So I like, for example, I eat a lot at Akerkar Bhojanalay in Kalba Devi. I like a lot of the local places. At the same time, places. Our Chinese food here, I think, is awesome. This sort of.
I knew Veer was going to describe it.
So
I'm talking about our Indianized Chinese food, which I happen to love.
Yeah, and we have Raju Chinese outside HR.
I'm talking about the Indianized Chinese food, which I happen to love very much. So.
Okay.
Yeah, that's that. So I think places that sort of have this sort of khatta meeta kind of thing has like a lot to do with the Bombay taste profile.
I mean, if I had to put my list, Akerkar Bhojanalay would definitely be up there.
Okay, let's put you on the spot.
Yeah, so
give us your 5 top Bombay restaurants.
For me, it's really the Gujarati and the Maharashtrian.
5.
Okay.
Names, 5.
Akerkar Bhojanalay.
Okay, that's easy. He's already said it.
Highway Gomantak
Okay.
on Bandra East.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Sorry, the place in Girgaon, the Maharashtrian place, which
you love so much you can't
Panchikar.
remember its name. Okay. All right.
Panchikar, sorry,
All
I
right.
keep
Okay, then.
forgetting that one. Well, okay, Goan food is not done very, very well in Bombay, but if I had to do it, then I would go to Snowflake at Dhobi Talao.
I don't know Snowflake. Okay.
And I don't think you really should. I don't think you're missing out very much. But of all the Goan places, that really is the one that I would go to. And
You're a Mangalorean, right?
Yes.
You're East Indian, so.
No, I'm Mangalorean.
You're a Mangalorean. So any Mangalorean food place you'd recommend?
there aren't any Mangalorean Catholic places in
Yeah,
the city, which
there
is the
are.
food that I know, and
Right.
it's mostly the Mangalorean, the Shetty place and the Bunt places, which is not the
Which is
food-
not even authentic of their food in Mangalore, right?
Absolutely.
So that's pretty sad situation. Is there a Chinese restaurant you would go to in Bombay?
Well, I'm with Rahul on this, and I would go to any of the Indian
No,
Chinese.
I mean Chinese.
Well, there isn't very much in Bombay.
All
The closest is Yawacha, if I had to.
Only for the dim sum, not
Yeah.
the main courses, yeah?
I don't know Chinese. I know only Indian Chinese. It's true.
Cop out.
No, fact.
But Nicole, what would be on your list?
I would have to start with Trishna/Gajali. Actually, both are fantastic. It's basically about the bumla. If the bombil is fried properly, we're gonna go there. I mean, we've actually been to these places and only eaten, between me and my family, 10 and 12 plates of bombil and koli vada. So that's one. Indigo Delhi used to be a really popular favorite. Then you left. So that has changed.
No comment.
Yeah, and I think copper chimney or Khyber, actually, for the Indian food is fantastic. And Chinese-wise, I really like China Garden. Whether it's authentic, not authentic, I love it. It's fantastic.
I happen to like Ling's very much, which is in the area.
Ling's is fantastic.
But I eat very, very specific things there, you know. Yeah, well.
So no Parsi place on your list?
I am not a fan of Parsi food.
Okay. Well, we've got two panelists who've alienated everyone.
20 people shouting. I've grown up eating Parsi food. I'm done with it unless I have to eat it, I think.
So I'll alienate half the audience, you alienate
That's done. It works for me. We actually eat a lot of like Bangalorean Goan curries and things at home. It's not so much Parsi food. I find it too heavy and just no good for the waistline.
Which brings me to a question that someone asked me actually recently at another session. When did India, I mean the question was India, but I'm going to keep it to Bombay. Did Bombay ever have a golden age of restaurants, or haven't seen it as yet?
Well, I don't know. I do know. I was talking many years ago when I first started off to a gentleman called by the name of Mody, and he was telling me about how in the 60s, I think, there used to be. Now, this isn't to do with a golden age of restauranting, but he was telling me that they existed something called the Bombay Gourmet Society. Okay, and it was a group. It started off as a group of 12 couples, who and the deal was that once a month one of the couples had to cook for the other 11. And but it meant that right from the marketing to cooking to cleanup to serving to everything, it was done by that couple. And from what I understand, it was brutally honest, where at the end of the meal the other 11 couples either did this or this. And if it was this, you were out of this group, and the next couple on the list entered the fray. And I think it finally fell pressure to taking on more members, and of course you can't have a sit-down meal for that many people in homes that started to get smaller and smaller, and so it all died. But I also remember my parents telling me and talking about, you were sort of mentioning a little bit about how Bombay used to be a sort of a lot more swinging place. There were places to dance and places to listen to music and places to eat and dine. So I guess those might have been those golden years. I don't know. Before my time, anyway.
Yeah, before both our times, he says quickly. But yeah, I remember in the 60s and the early 70s, if you wanted to go out and dance, if you wanted to listen to live music, there was Little Hut at the Ritz, which nobody remembers any longer, Talk of the Town, which I've mentioned, the Rendezvous, Supper Club. There were so many interesting places. Some of them had good food. The Rendezvous, for instance, in those days had really, really terrific food. Some didn't have great food, but there was a sense of a scene. You could go out. There was a sense of dining. There was a sense of fun. I think it's been destroyed now, mainly because of moralistic governments which charge you extra taxes if you have live music in restaurants, which object to dances or whatever. And partly, I think, because there's a lot of new money in Bombay. And I don't mean this in a snobbish way. I mean, genuinely, people are much richer than they were before. And they're now rich enough to demand what they want. And what they want is a certain kind of food. And any restaurateur who's in the business of making money will give them that kind of food. No? Let's take Trishna, which was mentioned, which I think was okay when it started out. But everybody goes there for one dish, which is the butter garlic crab, which when I remember it was originally on their Chinese menu, which they now pass off as a Mangalorean dish, which is unknown in Mangalore as far as I know. And the restaurants become a tourist trap because that's what people want and they're willing to pay for it.
I think I have to agree with you there in a way. Everyone at this point, all the new restaurants, if you look at them, everyone is opening with menus that are versions of themselves. It's not different. If you go to a new restaurant in Bandra, you go to a new restaurant in town, you've got versions of Eggs Benedict, different kinds of
Cheap and
truffle,
cheerful.
cheap and cheerful. It's different omelets and truffle oil, and like it's versions of themselves. It's not. There's no originality. It's very few and far.
And it's all versions of repackaged Bombay street food in a way.
In a way, that's become a new trend as well.
Whatever. But as you said, I think there's very little fresh cuisine and fresh ideas. Yeah, absolutely.
And unfortunately, that trend has actually extended to decor as well. I mean,
They all look
they really do. They all look the same. It started
Cheap
with
and
social.
cheerful.
It started with social, with its very refurbished sort of thing, and now that's the trend across every place we go. I went to this place across the road, 145, the other day, and it's the same thing. They've tried to be social in a completely different way, but the menu is the same and the decor is the same. The name is just different.
Okay.
Have we rubbished Bombay enough?
Well, in all fairness, I mean, it is becoming a city, and I think it's just not Bombay, but as you pointed out, Veer, it's across the country. It's a process of cloning, really. It's all becoming pretty much the same. So even if there is a certain entrepreneurial spirit to start off with, it all just becomes versions of the same, you know. But let me just open it out for questions now. Is there anyone? Okay, we already have a.
Two questions for all four of you. Question number one, which is your favorite go-to cuisine for comfort? And number two, best biryani in South Bombay?
Okay.
Okay. You want to start? Walk down the line.
Comfort food is easy for me, at least. This is not a cop-out answer, but it's a fact. Okay, for like me, I eat. It's very mood-based. So there are days I wake up, I want sushi, and days I want vada pav. So it goes from one to the other. Real comfort for me though, I would have to say is chaat. So I don't know. The best biryani. Christ. Mukhtar's done some great stuff at Neil, I have to say. I mean, this is not. No, seriously, I really like what he does. I don't know.
Yeah, I love the Bombay biryanis, the Bora biryanis and the Khoja biryanis, but I can't think of very many places where I've had really good ones in Bombay outside of private homes. The sort of Bombay versions of North Indian biryanis, the less said, the better. Comfort food, I'm sorry, I have to echo what Rahul says. I think chaat for almost all of us who have to eat in restaurants for a living or for one reason or another, chaat is always something that relaxes us, that comforts us. In terms of cuisines, I think pretty much anybody who does this for a living has to be promiscuous. We have to go out and try everything all the time. And we can't really afford wives in the sense of food. Yeah? We just have new girlfriends every time we go to a new restaurant.
Comfort food for me is pizza. It's Italian food, really. It's basically a very thick, fat, cheesy Domino's pizza, unfortunately. And biryani-wise, again, I don't think I've eaten too many biryanis in different places, but I actually really like the biryani at Delhi Darbar at Kulaba. You have a mic?
Yeah, sorry, I have one. So comfort food for me, it's very, very simple. It's my bacon and fried egg sandwich. Very, very straightforward. And if I'm going to order something out, then yeah, I'd go with chaat or I'd go with Indian Chinese. But again, biryani, yes, if you've traveled to North India, you know that there is no good Bombay biryani. But if I am in the mood for a fun biryani, then I will go to Baghdadi.
This one is for Mr. Sanghvi, since he has seen the entire evolution of...
Hello, sorry, who's asking question? They're blinding me in the manner of the Gestapo. Okay, all right, yeah, go on.
So, no, I just wanted to ask you about the South Indian, the entire restaurant thing, because Matunga, because you've covered from 60s to now, I feel Matunga restaurants, these cafes, the Madras Cafe or the other Udupi restaurants, I think that has probably has remained the same. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I haven't gone to Matunga recently, but I used to go there a lot when I lived in Bombay and when I was young. And those were, I thought, very good restaurants of that type because they were catering not to outsiders, but people from their own community who would know bullshit from the real thing if they ate it. I always thought that they were very wonderful and gave you a real taste to South India. Unfortunately, now my work takes me to South India so often that I don't actually come to Bombay to eat South Indian food. But on the subject of the Udupi restaurants, I believe, because we live in an age of fast food and quick service restaurants, the real Indian fast food, I believe, are the dosas and the idlis. You go to one of those places and they will give you a perfect dosa in minutes flat, cooked by a guy who's got skill, who makes it. They've fermented the batter. There's skill, there's passion, and there's consistency. For me, that is a mark of genius, the way in which they turn those out hundreds every day. And I'll take that over a McDonald's a million times over.
My question's for Rahul. When you opened up Indigo in Bombay in '99, it was the only European or Mediterranean restaurant in the city. And how does one create a culture of people stepping out and opening up to new things? And today that's become comfort food for my generation. So how long does it take and how does one go about it?
How long does it take? That's a tough one. I think, a lot of introduction of cuisines to people, and as I said, I think as I said earlier, it's not so much to do with doing a particular kind of restaurant, whether you do a Mexican or a Italian or a French or something along those lines. Firstly, I think it's to do with, as I said, to do with integrity and honesty in the food. All right. I think you could be serving anything, and as long as you're doing it well. I don't like the word authentic because I don't know really what it means. I think the minute you take a cuisine out of its home, it's no longer the same anyway, because ingredients are different, temperatures are different, everything about it is different. So and things translate. I think it's important, if when you're eating out, if you kind of say to yourself, yeah, I'm enjoying what I'm eating here, then I think you're having a good dining experience, and I think that's part of the whole education process. Right now what's happening is that we've all sort of alluded to the fact that everybody's kind of doing the same thing. It's all playing safe. It's because what I think restaurateurs believe today the market wants. It's where they think it's safe to minimize risk and turn a buck. Is that healthy for the food industry going forward? Probably not, but I think they need to go through the shakeout before you will have another crop of people that will come out of this foment and decide to start doing other cuisines. And for home, the other thing is, I think what we're lacking here tremendously is a groundswell of homegrown talent, and I think once you start getting that, and you have chefs who are actually cooking and driving cuisine forward, is like where all the change will happen. But to come back to, I digressed a little bit. You asked me more about how long it takes for people to change their taste palette. I don't think people don't change their taste profile. I think it's a question of learning a language, if you will. When you start eating a particular kind of food over and over again, you start to understand nuance. And I think it's like appreciating art. It's you sort of look at a painting or a genre of paintings over and over again, and you start to see something in it. And I think it's the same thing to do with food or with anything, really. It's the more exposure you have to it, you're able to slowly separate the good from the bad, and you start to understand why somebody's able to, why somebody uses one oil versus another, why you use one cut of meat, something else, etc. And I think once you start understanding nuance and you start appreciating that, is like when you start to get a handle on a particular cuisine.
Sorry, Rahul, just to add on to his question, talking about journeys as well, I mean, don't you feel the Indian consumer, the Bombay consumer, has taken a much greater journey into food? There's a much more sense of exploration. The new generation has been exposed to a lot more restaurants than many of us were. I mean, a lot more cuisines. Is there a greater demand from their part that restaurateurs perhaps are not addressing?
I'm sure there is. It's. I was asked this, when I first set up Under the Over years ago. People said, "Oh, it'll never work. The only thing that works is Chinese and Indian." And I have this story which I've said hundreds of times before, and it's a question of, if you go to a place and everyone's wearing the color red, they're wearing it for two reasons. Either everyone only loves the color red, or the shops only sell red. And maybe if the shop started selling blue, people will start wearing blue too. And it's the reason we eventually opened Under the Over, and we opened Indigo, and we opened all, the other places also. And it's, I think it's, people want to play safe. It's an expensive business. It's a risky business, and it's, you want to stay safe. Is that, as I said, is that good for the industry going forward? Probably not. But is it good for business? In the short term, it is. Long term, no, it's not.
Across the panel, your favorite signature dish at the various clubs and gymkhanas in Bombay, and for Nicole, could this be the theme of your next book?
Should I? Man, I love the boiled chicken sandwiches at Wellington Club.
Yeah.
KGAF is good too, but I'm sorry, those boiled chicken sandwiches just do it for me. After a swim, and even their wafers with ketchup was just spot on, So,
my father was a communist who refused to join any club because he said, "Who the hell are these?" Used word beginning with B, to judge my social acceptability. Most of these clubs didn't allow Indians till very recently, and for some reason I have maintained that prejudice. I am not a member of any club anywhere in the world. Right?
Communist as in Groucho Marx?
Sorry? Communist as in Groucho Marx, and also I wouldn't be a member of any club that would let me in. Since you're quoting Groucho.
I think I have to agree with Rahul. The KGAF is my favorite at all clubs across the board. Best at Wellington, and oddly, surprisingly, very good at Kobe, which is not a club, but really not bad at Kobe. Theme for my next book is still being worked on. Not quite sure, but I will keep this in mind.
So I don't know if it's a journalist thing, but I'm not a member of any club either. So not even a press club.
Not
It's good photo.
Press club?
Yeah.
Really?
Okay, do we have any more questions? Okay, great. Thank you so much, guys, for this evening. It was a great evening. Can we have a round of applause? Great. Thank you.